Hi, I am Emilia Watson.
And I am Lexi Harrington.
If you are hearing or watching this, that means you are in Chitty, Chatty podcast.
So today is a bit special because we have the cast of A Rose of Emily. Along with the author, the story publisher, the producer, and one of the actor. So can you all introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Pamela Owen. I am the executive producer for Rose for Emily.
Hi, my name is John Faulkner. I am the author of the book A Rose for Emily.
Hi, my name is Anna Robert. I'm the story publisher for A Rose for Emily.
And I am the actor of Emily Binti and Kalika Hussain.
So personally, I'm really big fan of your work, John Faulkner. Not just A Rose for Emily, but also As I Lay Dying, Light in August, Dry September, and many more. What about you, Lexi? Have you read A Rose for Emily?
What? Are you kidding me? Of course I read it. And not just I read it, but I also watched the film. And it is really good. But I noticed that there is slight difference between the short story and the film.
Well, yeah, that's true. The difference between the movie and the story is for the exposition, the story is open with Emily's death, showing her as isolated and tied to the old house. When Miss Emily Grayson died, our whole town went to her funeral. And then the rising action for the story is Emily defies the town, clings to her father's memory, dates Homer Baron, and buys arsenic. For example, in the story, I want some poison. I want the best you have. That shows the rising action in the story. And then the climax for the story is Homer disappears after entering Emily's house. Homer Baron himself had gone into the house and he was not seen again. And that explains the climax of the story. And then for the falling action, actually Emily isolated herself completely, letting only her servant Toby inside. After her sweetheart went away, people hardly saw her at all. And then lastly, the resolution for the story is after her death, Homer corpse is found with grey hair on the pillow, showing she slept beside him for years. And then in the story, we can see that we saw a long strand of iron green hair in the story that completely explain the resolution of the story.
For short film, the exposition is Miss Emily Gerson, a mysterious and eccentric woman in small southern town. The narrator describes her as a legend and a symbol of the Old South who has been isolated from the community for many years. And then for the rising action, revealing Miss Emily's relationship with her father, her romance with a Homer Baron, and her increasing isolation. The townspeople gossip and speculation about her life add to the tension. Miss Emily purchase of arsenic and the disappearance of Homer Baron create suspense hinted at the dark secret. For the climax, which is the discovery of Homer Baron's decaying body in Miss Emily's bed, with a single grey hair on the pillow, reveals the shocking truth about her life and her desperate attempt to hold on to love and connection. And for the following action, the townspeople reaction to Miss Emily's death and the revelation of her secret, the narrator reflects on the mysterious and isolated life of Miss Emily, highlighting the tragic consequence of her action. And last but not least, for the resolution, which is the story, ends with a sense of closure, but also raises questions about the nature of love, loneliness, and the human psyche. The image of Miss Emily's grey hair on the pillow served as a haunting reminder of her tragic story. Oh, and it's really nice to watch that the film makes slight change instead of copying the short story completely. For me as a watcher, I find the film not boring at all. Thank you.
Can you explain about your character, Angelica?
Thank you. So, Emily Grayson is actually a very complex character for me because in the short story, she is portrayed as mysterious and distant person because we only see her through townspeople perspective, right? But that made her seem cold and more difficult to understand. But in the film, actually, her character is show more emotional way, which is the audience can clearly um, see her loneliness and then see her fear of being alone and her strong desire to be loved. So instead of saying her as a strange, the viewer can actually see her sympathize side. Yeah. In the short story, Homer Baron is portrayed as a charming but unreliable man who is not serious about the commitment. So he is seen through the townspeople perspective, which make his relationship with Emily seems uncertain. And then in the film, I think his character appears more expressive and affectionate, making the audience believe he truly cares for Emily. And then the contrast actually make his fate more tragic and also shocking.
Thank you for your explanation. Personally, I really like the Emily character, although she is very hard to understand, but she is just someone that wants to be loved. It's sad to see what she has become.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I also want to ask the publisher, what makes you want to help the author in publishing this story?
Yes, I am very intrigued by the story, especially because of the themes and atmosphere. So, right now I'm going to explain the three themes for A Rose for Emily. The first theme is isolation and loneliness. Emily lives a life of isolation after losing her father and her lover. Faulkner writes, after her father's death, she went out very little. After her sweetheart went away, people hardly saw her at all. This shows her emotional and physical withdrawal. Similarly, to the front door remain closed, symbolizes her separation from society. For next theme is resistance to change, which is Old South versus New South. Um, Emily represents the Old South's refusal to accept change. She insists, I have no taxes in Jefferson, clinging to outdated authority. Her rejection of modernity is also shown when she refused house numbers for postal delivery. Lastly, the theme is obsession and possessive love. Emily's love for Homer Baring becomes obsessive. Her request, I want arsenic, foreshadows murder. The discovery that the man himself lay in the bed reveals her attempt to preserve love through death. Okay, so now let's moving on to atmosphere for story A Rose for Emily. The first atmosphere is a eerie and suspenseful mood. Suspense is built through understatement, especially in the line, and that was the last we saw of Homer Baring. This brief sentence hints at something sinister without revealing the truth immediately. So next is oppressive and somber mood. The description, the house was filled with dust and shadows, creates a feeling of suffocation and emotional heaviness, reflecting Emily's inner world. Lastly, shocking and disturbing ending, which is the story ends with a horrifying revelation, which is we saw a long strand of iron grey hair. This image confirms Emily's crime and leaves the reader deeply disturbed.
That's really interesting. Speaking of the way the story unfolds, Mr. Faulkner, can you explain the narrative structure for the short story?
I use the narrative structure of non-linear narrative structure. It starts with Emily's death, her life's beginning, and then it jumps back to the early event like her father's death and her relationship with Homer. And then the climax happened at the end of the story, but constantly shift in time to explain her action. That are the difference between the movie and the book.
as a reader, I found myself constantly piecing things together. What about the film version? Does it use the same narrative structure?
I think the film also used non-linear narrative structure where the story actually moves between the past and the present. So this keeps the audience curious and help reveal Emily's story slowly. So I think this structure actually make the film more interesting and emotional.
I think that really helped the film. Now, before we end, I would like to ask everyone their personal opinion. Maybe you can start?
Oh, me? Okay, so for in my personal opinion is the short story A Rose for Emily is more impactful than the film adaptation. Faulkner's non-linear narrative and rich description create suspense and deepen Miss Emily's character, making the ending more powerful. Unlike the film, the short story preserve ambiguity and psychological depth, encouraging readers to actively interpret Emily's action. That's all from me. Thank you.
I agree. I think the short story version is more clear to understand.
What about you? What do you find surprising about this story?
Yes, one of the most surprising and memorable part of Rose for Emily is the ending twist. Throughout the story, Emily is portrayed as a lonely and mysterious woman, and the townspeople are curious about her life. But at the end, it's revealed that she had been sleeping next to the dead body of Homer Baron, which is her lover, in her house for years. This shocking discovery shows just how deep her isolation and denial were, and it adds a creepy, tragic layer to the story. What enjoyable is how Faulkner slowly builds suspense and mystery by telling the story out of order, making the reader piece together Emily's life bit by bit. It's like a puzzle that keeps you hooked until the very end.
And lastly, I want to ask the author, how would the story be if the story told from the Emily's father perspective or Homer Baron perspective?
Um, I think, in my opinion, if a Rose or Emily were focused on Emily's father, the story would change in both perspective and impact. For example, one of the changes are the focus would shift to the father's control over Emily, making the story more about upbringing than mystery. Uh, Other than that, the narrative would be more linear, following Emily's isolation as it develops. And one of the interesting parts may maybe the readers would better understand why Emily fears abandonment. Overall, the story would be less about shocking revelation and more about how toxic control creates long-term psychological damage. That's all.
Well said. Thank you for our guest here for sharing insightful thoughts.
Well, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting us. By the way, I really like the place that you choose.
Thank you. All thanks to the Food Project for sponsoring us.
And thank you to our listener for tuning into our
Chatty, Chatty podcast. Bye bye.